Okay, today we're going to talk about, well, might help if I put on the slideshow. We're going to talk about Delusion 2.0. If you want, last week somebody asked, I had said I had a friend who was going up to the Kurdish areas. If you want to send me a email to my church email address, which is, it's either johnhaller@fbchapel.com or jhaller@fbchapel.com. I can get you Mark's PayPal account so you can contribute to that if you like. I apologize. I was going to put it in the YouTube comments and I couldn't find out the place to respond. You know, as I prepare these things each week, sometimes I'm stunned at the speed with which things are happening, and this week was no exception. As I've said many times, the world recognizes that things, well, just aren't going the right way. One of the areas that we look at to indicate that we're living in the end times is the fact that there's growing delusion and deception. In Matthew chapter 24, Jesus warned us more about deception in the end times than anything else. There would be many antichrists. There will be great deception. Take heed that no man deceive you. Take heed that you don't fall for any of these false Christs that would be coming on the scene. It's also talked about in Romans chapter 1 that God sends a judgment on the world, that there will be strong delusion. And it's a judgment. And part of it is tied into improper view of sexuality, and it certainly appears that that's something that has come about in our time, especially in the last few years since in America, the Supreme Court issued the same-sex decision, the Obergefell decision, allowing same-sex marriage. And that just sort of opened the floodgates to all sorts of things, transgenderism, and just one thing right after the other. And it was to be expected, but it's come in like a flood. In Luke chapter 17, Jesus said that it would be as it was in the days of Noah and as in the days of Lot. And I've mentioned many times that Lot felt oppressed. It says that in 2 Peter chapter 2, that Lot felt oppressed by what he saw going on in Sodom around him. And I know from the communications and emails messages that I get from people that watch this and other updates, prophecy updates that people do, is that they do feel oppressed. They feel like they're really not part of the world. And I do think that part of that is God is doing a work in the faithful remnant and sort of decoupling us from the world so that we realize that our hope is in Christ, that however we depart this life will be with Christ. And that's our great hope. Because even Paul said, that it was better for him to depart this life than to remain, because his focus, his love was someplace else. Now, that doesn't mean we just give up or we just sit back and that we don't be salt and light and do all of those things. But in 1 Corinthians chapter 1, it also talks about this. For the preaching of the cross is to them that perish foolishness, but unto us which are saved it is the power of God. For it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of wise, and I will bring to nothing the understanding of the prudent. And in that passage in 1 Corinthians chapter 1, my little paraphrase of it is, God morons the world. The word there is the root word for moron or moronic, and God gives people over to a foolishness. And we've looked at a few times we've looked at the scale. Idiot is the lowest, then you have imbecile, and then you have moron. So even God doesn't send you all the way down to idiot status. Sometimes that's self-inflicted, and it seems like that's happening a lot in the world. And I could bring you example after example. And so, look, I expect this from the world. I want you to know that. I only talk about these things, one, is so that you're aware of what's going on, and that you might be able to deal with it as someone operating from a biblical worldview. And two, that when you see these things and you think, well, that's not right, that you're not alone. There's a lot of others of us who think that those things aren't right as well. Because it is crazy out there. I'll give you an example. I mean, one of the prestigious universities in the United States is George Washington University. It's named after, in case you've been to college, you might not know that George Washington was the first president of the United States. He had a very long and distinguished military history. Before that, founded different things. He was a very wise man. By the way, he only lived to how old was he? I think he was 67 when he passed away. 67 or 68, somewhere around there. So he lived a relatively short life, but boy, he accomplished a lot. And he wasn't perfect, okay? I mean, in his time, he was a giant, though, aside from being 6'4", but he was a giant of a man. And it seems that the George Washington University, which bears his name, has gotten away from that. They have they call this an Excellence in Leadership Seminar. Christian privilege. Okay, you've heard of white privilege. You've heard of male privilege. Now there is Christian privilege. And here's what the description says. How do Christians in the USA experience life in an easier way than non-Christians? Even with the separation of church and state, are there places where Christians have built-in advantages over non-Christians? How do we celebrate Christian identities and acknowledge that Christians receive unmerited perks from institutions and systems all across our country? Let's reflect upon ways we can live up to our personal and national values that make room for all religious and secular identities on an equal playing field. All are welcome, except probably white male Christians, but now listen. If I showed up there, they would say I have white privilege because I had no choice on that. I was born that way. I mean, even up till today, I mean, we know that gender is up for debate now, or you can choose your gender. And there are some that are trying to choose their race. But right now they say that, you were born white, therefore you have a lot of extra privileges and that sort of thing. And my dad was a minister. I lived in we weren't wealthy, but this Christian privilege, you're not born a Christian. You're only a Christian when you're what? Born again. And it's a choice that's made. So they're saying now that because you choose that, you have privilege. Because you choose to stay in the same marriage for life or until death do you part, that gives you privilege. Because you choose to raise your children in a male-female household, that gives them privilege. This, it's almost impossible for me to explain for you what this moron is trying to accomplish in this seminar. And he is a moron. He's lost the ability to reason. I know Dennis Prager was talking about this on his show, and the other lady says, "Yeah, I'm gonna write a blog about all the Christian privilege I have. That I stay faithful to my husband. I'll be married to him for life. I raise my children. I discipline my children. I work hard. I go to church. But I choose to do all of those things, and I do them because they're the right things. But what this is, I think, is a way for this will sound really, like I haven't been judgmental already, so here it goes. For lazy people to have an excuse as to why they're not accomplishing anything. Because, we weren't rich. We lived in an 800 square foot, 3-bedroom house. You know, we had a coal furnace. I had to go down and I remember going down in the morning because there was frost, you know, and the kitchen. I'd go down and fire up. When I was a kid, you know, if you're first up, you went down and fired up the furnace. And it didn't. I mean, it didn't damage me, but this is privilege. I mean, this just shows where a prestigious university goes and has the seminar, and they think that they're accomplishing something. So I won't make any comments on this other than I'm sure that all the conspiracy people are going to have something to say about this. What caused it? I don't know. There was a fire at Trump Tower yesterday in New York City. One person died. It was, you know, you can see it's a pretty spectacular fire. It's 50 floors up, so it's not like you're going to get a ladder up there. So they had some brave firefighters went up there to fight that thing. I won't talk about this too much either. This is just an example, I think, of the lawlessness that exists in our society now. That the FBI, who's enforcing the law, won't respond to legal subpoenas. It's inexcusable. I don't understand it. And Kimberly Strassel had a great article about why are they doing this? Are they hiding something? Listen, I'm a lawyer. In my career, I've served hundreds of subpoenas on parties to get documents. And the presumption in the law is, in fact, now with electronic discovery, when they go back and look at all of your email and that type of thing, and you have to produce all of that, massive amounts of information. I mean, talking about terabytes of information in some cases. And if you don't produce it or you've destroyed it, the presumption is you're hiding something, and they will, if any inference is to be drawn from that, it will be drawn against you in court. So why can't we draw the inference? Why can't we apply that same standard to the FBI? It's amazing. This is a problem that I just was not aware of. A lot of news that this year there have been more murders in London than New York City. They're relatively the same size cities. And of course in London they're kind of like, well, what's going on? What's happening? But we know what's happening. We know that they've let a lot of people in that don't share their values. And there's an increase in violence because of that. I've heard a number of speeches in the past week by a lady named Katie Hopkins, and I know you don't need to write to me and tell me that she's the most hated woman in Britain and everything. I get that, okay? But I haven't really heard anything that she's said that really causes me concern. She's gone recently she went to Sweden because she had heard that there were no-go zones in Sweden. She was on the metro or subway, whatever they call it there in Stockholm, and she was staying on the train because she wanted to go into the part of the city where she's heard that there's no-go zones. And when she wasn't getting off the train, some lady was telling her, no, you have to get off the train now. You have to get off the train now. It's not safe for you to go any further. But then they cooked the statistics, the crime statistics, to show that, oh, well, there's really no problem, or they ignore what the problem really is in Stockholm. And they've had, I think the statistic she quoted was they've had 1 million immigrants over the past few years. Well, Sweden is not that big. I mean, what is it, 6, 7, 8 million people to begin with? And they brought in all of these immigrants, and now they're wondering why they have a problem. And now in London, they've done the same thing, and now they have a problem. Listen to this. I mean, there was a report this morning that like 2 out of 3 burglaries, you don't even get a response from the police now in London. I think that was in the Telegraph or the Guardian. Here's a little BBC interview with I think a member of Parliament talking about his experience and like, I've been trying to call the police and here's how they've responded.
We've cut our border force. The National Crime Agency is absolutely the lead agency in this regard. It itself reports an increase in this activity. But what I'm saying is we aren't debating this in Parliament. I raised it.
Or indeed in the City of London. We haven't heard anything from the Mayor of London. Where is he?
Well, look, I've had 4 deaths. I have not had a phone call from the Home Secretary. I have not had a phone call from the Mayor. What I see,
you haven't had a phone call from the Mayor? You're a Labour MP?
No one's come to visit my constituency. This is happening across London at large. Frankly, I'm sick of the political football. What I want is a political consensus. The City of Glasgow had a problem 10 years ago. It was the murder capital of this country. Last year, not one death as a result of a stabbing, because there was a political consensus between the Labour Party and the SNP in the Scotland example. They have a public health strategy, all agencies coming together, all resources, and the community itself was sick of it. So people are stepping up to act. So
yeah, so it's interesting. And they don't have the Second Amendment in United Kingdom. So let David Hogg go over there and bug them about getting rid of, oh, well, they don't have a Second Amendment, but they have more murders in London this year. And that's the subject of The Economist magazine this week, is what's going on. This is probably a minefield, but this is the front page of this morning's New York Times and their Sunday review section, where they have all of their opinion pieces. The official opinion pieces are in the Sunday review section. The other opinion pieces are in the news part of the newspaper. So the good rule of the New York Times is, if you want to know what the real story is, read the last few paragraphs of a story. Because they are in the news business, and they have to tell at least a little bit of the truth. They can't lie about everything or give their opinion about everything and still be a newspaper. But this week, they have, on the Sunday Review, they have their opinion. They have 2 columns. One is about the death of democracy, and talking about people in Europe like Hungary and Poland, where democracy is dying, and this is just terrible, and we just can't allow this to happen. These strongmen coming in, and they're fascist. And then there is a story here at the right. See, here's fascism on the march. Okay, so they have Europe there, but this fascism on the march is not about Europe. The column is written by Madeleine Albright. Okay, but she was a Secretary of State of the United States for 4 years in the Clinton administration. And she writes this article, Fascism on the March, Will We Stop Trump Before It's Too Late? Now, I want to, listen, we can argue about the president and whether he's a good guy or a bad guy or all this other stuff, okay? I get that. But he's not shutting people, he's not censoring people, is he? Not that I know of. He's just calling people out. And so this is fake. This is Delusion 2.0, in my opinion. And I will just tell you that in the days, weeks, months, and years ahead, however long this world has to go before the Lord returns, this is the beginning, not the end. I think it gets worse. I mean, we have this whole thing with Facebook. Eric Barger was on Jan Markell yesterday, and he did a great job talking about different things with how these people use data. We give them they have a product, it's your data, Google and Facebook. And we give it to him, and he said he downloaded his Google data file and his Facebook data file. You can do that. You look up his videos or articles on his website, Eric Barger, I think it's ericbarger.com, and And he gives you instructions, I think he said he was going to, about how to download your thing. And he says it's like my Google data file is gigabytes. Said that every picture he had ever taken with any of his cell phones was in his data file. Every single one. Google had a list of every place he had been over the years. So, look, a lot of people say, well, get off Facebook, do this, and, Gmail. I mean, we're considering getting rid of our Gmail accounts, and we'll notify you if we switch. There's encrypted email accounts, I think Reagan.com, I think Proton Email, and others, because they track all of your email. I mean, I used the example last Sunday. I went to Golf Galaxy. I was looking at the pretty colored golf balls, and I got home, and there was an ad. And I did swing by the wedge section of the store, but it had the pictures of the pretty colored golf balls that I was looking at. When I got home, it knew where I was. And at this point, I don't think it's possible to, unless you're going to go live off the grid someplace, and then if you're in Florida, they'll sue you because you're living off the grid, and to make you live on the grid. And it happens. You don't have, do you want electricity? How many of you like electricity? Okay, my wife she goes, you bet. And she loves that one hair dryer, blow dryer too. We got the Cayman once, and her luggage didn't make it, and her blow dryer. So here we are in paradise, and she's having a meltdown. Like, how can I we're on vacation. Well, they don't have the right kind of blow dryer. The right kind of blow dryer. I didn't know there was, when I do use a blow dryer, it's like a, 30-second. Anyway, that's another point here. So, but this data thing, it's not possible to put the genie back in the bottle. And listen, God has a bigger database on you than anybody else anyway. So that's the one you really ought to worry about. But listen to what this Facebook says. They're going to set ads rule. Facebook Inc. will soon require that advertisers wanting to run ads on hot-button political issues go through an authorization process first. A move the social network hopes will prevent the spread of misinformation across its platform. In China, this is an article that is in a couple places in Foreign Policy. Life inside China's social credit laboratory. The party's massive experiment in ranking and monitoring Chinese citizens has already started. Do you think it's going to stop in China? You're soon going to get, and I shared this a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, Wired magazine had a thing about the social score that you're going to get. And if you're a 549 on the 600 scale, if you're only a 483, I don't want anything to do with you because you're going to drive down it's like a credit score. You're going to drive down my score. So I'm sorry, you're just not good enough to be around me. I've had friends mention that conservative friends of theirs on Facebook are sort of they're hard to find. Their pictures are not there in the friends list and that type of thing. And they're conservative, outspoken people. They're being what's called shadow banned. Here is a brief clip of a town hall that Breitbart did the other night. I think I put it up on my Facebook page. You can find it. I'm sure this gives me my credits. I'm on the down elevator, and I get that. So this is a clip, just a few minutes of Ann Coulter talking about some of the things that she's observed. She's been shadow banned. She has lots of followers on Twitter. But what's happening is those followers are not seeing, Twitter is preventing those followers from getting notified when she tweets something. It's called shadow banning. Twitter can say, those are the fascists, these little Twitter, Facebook people, they're the fascists. They're the ones who don't want free speech and that sort of thing. And I know there's goals like we can set up a separate network. It's very expensive. And Google has cornered the market. Facebook has. I don't know if it can be. I don't know if you can put the genie back in the bottle. Here's just a little bit of Ann.
What do you think? Is it, describe what you mean by that.
I've been waiting for this even before Trump came along. I just think we'll all wake up one day and I'll try to go to Breitbart and won't be able to get there. I'll try to email you and won't be able to get there. I won't be able to find the Drudge Report. The internet has been a disaster for the left. Why? And this isn't just a liberal issue, but this is my perspective on it. The left already controls all the institutions. They have all the networks. They have all the newspapers. They have the schools. They have the universities. They're teaching preschoolers white privilege. They can't possibly gain anything from the internet. No, the internet, oh my gosh, it was the greatest thing that ever happened to conservatives. So that is what they need to go after and shut it down. And they play this game. I mean, now, once Trump came along, now it's just direct censorship, as is happening to Breitbart. But even the things that seem content neutral, it's like the old line, the law in its majesty prevents a prince or a pauper from sleeping under the bridge. Well, it really kind of impacts the pauper a little bit more. Any attack on the internet, on total free speech on the internet, is a disaster for conservatives, which is what we're finding in the stories you guys were telling me the other night of what, I mean, I suppose I shouldn't pay attention to these things more. I am trying to communicate, but I pretty much just send out my tweets and I don't know or care who reads them. They're out there. But people who actually run businesses like Breitbart pay attention to these things, and it's really shocking what is being done to Breitbart. This is a major threat. I'm a little ticked off at Donald Trump right now. But one thing that he's done, we may never get a wall, but his concept of fake news has been so important, so great, because who is he calling fake news? That's what they've been trying to attack. That was the first attack on places like Breitbart. Oh, it's inaccurate. You can't trust it. Evan Osnos in the New Yorker recently wrote something about how Americans are ill-equipped to determine credible news from the incredible. And, you know, they'll believe stories from unfamiliar sources with typos. Well, okay, how about this week with the YouTube shooting, which I don't have a job, luckily, so I can sit around and watch TV all day. And when that story first broke, it was being covered like the moon landing. MSNBC brought in Brian Williams. It was 24/7. They're flying all the reporters out to YouTube headquarters. And then a few hours later, I noticed completely gone. Not a mention of that story anyplace. Oh, it turns out it was another problem of immigration. It was an Iranian shooter, so they don't want to mention it. This is an application of the Coulter rule after a mass shooting, or, you know, the longer it takes them to tell you the perpetrator's name, the less likely it is that it was a white man. So what most people do now, because of all of the fake news, and my entire career has really been exposing the fake news we've been getting from the mainstream media forever on McCarthy, Joe McCarthy, and Alger Hiss, and fake news on Darwinism, fake news on race crimes. It's just been pedaled to the metal recently. The old institutions of news communication are acting like the internet doesn't exist. But I suspect most of you, well, especially if you have jobs, which again, I do not, basically all the mainstream media is like a notice. There's been a shooting at YouTube, and then you go to the internet to find out what happened. Okay, look up YouTube online, and it's driving them crazy. So they start by attacking the crowdsourced news as inaccurate. Now, as I've been finding out much more from the brilliant Professor Epstein, it's way more than that. It is actual censorship, and it's terrifying.
And she's right. And I could do hours on talking about the problems they're having. I mean, I have a lot of friends that have monetized their YouTube channels, and it's been taken away. Whole YouTube channels have been taken down. Will ours be taken down? I don't know. We don't monetize. I think that kind of gives you a little bit of, maybe there's a poverty privilege that YouTube recognizes that. Now there's machines out that can scan your face. They're doing this in China. You know, you can, They don't need a chip. You know, they're picking up people for jaywalking based on facial recognition. All this stuff you see on the TV show like Person of Interest and that type of thing, it's really real stuff. So let's talk a little bit about, this is just going to be kind of a mixture of things about the Middle East and geopolitics and some things that are going on. So here is, so this is just sort of a historical thing, history being now 5 months ago. In November, Khomeini urged all Muslims to fight Israel. He recently came out, he said that at the time different methods are needed to fight against the usurper Zionist regime. And this is a continual theme of his. He posted this on his Facebook page. In the name of God, the most beneficent, the most merciful, respected scholar, your eminent Sheikh Mahmoud, the respected chairman of the International Union of Resistance Scholars. They need to start using abbreviations. At the end it says, I recommend all individuals who feel the importance of this great responsibility to continue different methods of fighting against the usurper Zionist regime. Now this week when they had this problems with Gaza and Hamas trying to breach the border fence and trying to provoke a response by the Israeli Defense Forces, he was tweeting, and this is the leader of Hamas. He says, no doubt, resistance is the only way to free and oppress Palestine, and it's the only cure for wounds on the body of that brave and proud nation. And there's no question that Iran is behind fomenting some of this, most of this violence. He also said this, on days when escalation of oppression and barbarism by the Zionists in Gaza has saddened and angry those who care for Palestine, we stress on the perpetual stance of the Islamic Republic regarding the issue of Palestine, which is an important issue for the Islamic nation. Today, the return of dignity and power to the Islamic nation is exclusively linked to resistance, while confronting arrogant powers and their wicked plots, and the issue of Palestine is at the top of Islam's international issues in the face of the arrogant front. Moving towards negotiations with the deceptive, lying, and usurper regime, it is an unforgettable error. I think this is a translation issue. It's an unforgivable error that will impede the victory of the Palestinian nation. The act of betrayal by some Arab heads of states, which is gradually being revealed, pursues the same goal. Who's he talking about? Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, MBS, as we'll refer to him. Lieberman met with Mattis in England, or someplace in Europe. And he said, Lieberman came out and said, the three main problems are Iran, Iran, Iran. I mentioned this article last week about the Muslim countries. This looks like a map that a Bible prophecy guy would make up, right? Because it's like all these nations, and there's jet planes and tanks, and all these green countries, and they're pointed right at red little Israel. And this is what Bible... So this comes out of a Turkish newspaper. It's pro-Erdogan. It happened back in December. I mentioned it last week. And so this is not Bible prophecy guys making this stuff up. Okay? This is what they're saying and doing. And this is, I think, unprecedented. And the guy behind this is Erdogan. Lower right-hand corner, this is Erdogan's victory about a year ago when he won election to the presidency. And, if he nears the end of his term, he'll switch the thing for prime minister. It appears he wants to be a caliph. He wants to reinstitute the the Ottoman Empire. And he wants to be the head of the Islamic Caliphate. He wants to reinstitute it. And he's been talking about it for months. And they had an emergency meeting after Trump made the declaration in December. The Organization of Islamic Countries had an emergency meeting in Ankara. Erdogan gave up and gave a speech like, we're going to fight for Jerusalem. We're going to fight for Jerusalem. We're not going to put up with this. Let's see. I'm going to talk about MBS in just a moment. I want to talk a little bit about Syria first. I mean, I don't know if you've been following what's been going on. And I'll talk a little bit about Gaza, but there were 10 Palestinians killed this week. I think there were 10 or so, 15, maybe 16 last week. And so in 2 weeks, there's been 26 Palestinians killed in these protests at the border. There's probably that many being killed every day or hour in Syria, and does anybody ever talk about it? And this is, eastern Ghouta, show you a map in just a minute. As you can see, it's been pulverized. And this is the eastern part of the city of Damascus. It's on the edge of the sort of the breadbasket, what was the breadbasket of Syria. And they've essentially, they've bombed it so that people left. I mean, they've left. The Assad's army has solidified control. This is from Haaretz, which is a left-wing newspaper, solidifies control while violating the accord with Israel. And so this is sort of since it's Haaretz and it's sort of related to the New York Times, you know that you got to read to the end. But look at what it says here in the beginning. First of all, it mentions that Trump wants to leave Syria. And even the left-wing press in Israel saying, well, wait, why do you want to leave Syria? You can't leave Syria. And then they're noting that the beautiful friendship between President Vladimir Putin and Turkish President Recep Erdogan begins with Russian acquiescence to the Turkish attacks on the Kurds in Afrin, North Syria, agreements for gas and oil pipelines to be laid down, speeding up the Russian supply of S-400 anti-aircraft missiles to Turkey, and even the establishment of a civilian nuclear reactor plant to be built by Russia in Turkey. And Putin went to Ankara this week, and he helped lay the cornerstone for this new nuclear power plant. I think it costs like $20 billion. And Turkey has more people in their armed forces than any other country in Europe, any other country in NATO except for the United States. In other words, Turkey remains a NATO member in name only. In practice, it's approaching the Russian sphere of influence, and Turkey's engagement in nuclear power could, like in Iran's case, develop into an acute interest in reactors for military purposes. Yeah, what do you think the chances of that is? Like on 0 to 100%. Can you go over 100%? And the chance that Erdogan's going to now seek nuclear weapons? And so they had this meeting this week, and this, depending on how you look at Ezekiel chapter 38, this is very significant. You have Turkey, which is the land of Magog, Meshach, Tubal. You have Iran, which is Persia. These are all talked about in Ezekiel 38 and 39 as these countries that are lying. And I personally think Russia will be involved in some way, coming from the north against Israel. And here they are meeting again. This is the second meeting they've had in the last few months. And this time they met in Ankara. They met in Sochi in Russia, their first meeting a few months ago. But the Syrians now, the news comes out today, oh, there's another gas attack. And Russia says, no, there's not. And everybody says, no, Syria did it. No, they didn't. The UN has trouble getting in there to find out exactly what's going on. The White House came out today and said, well, you know, we're not going to let this stand. But so what happened this week was they finally got control of eastern Ghouta, outside, just on the eastern part of Damascus. And this is a picture of what Ghouta looks like today. This is actually a part called Duma, and Duma is located, let's see. Here we go. Okay, so here is Duma right here. This green area. And here's Damascus. So you can see it's sort of a northeastern suburb of the city of Damascus. And it's been destroyed. Here's some drone footage. I don't think there's any sound on this. It was taken this week flying over the main square there in Duma. Look at the buildings. You think anybody's living there? And I'm telling you, I mean, this is edited down quite a bit from the 5-minute or so clip, but I don't think anybody's living there. Where do you think all those refugees came from? Right here. What were they? Sunni Muslims, for the most part, and Christians. And it goes like this. I mean, you could go block after block after block on this, and this is what you will see, is these destroyed buildings in Damascus. Now, not all Damascus looks like that yet. And there's rumors out there. There's Iranians are saying that America's going to attack Damascus in the near future. I don't know if that's true. I'll talk about that in just a moment as to why that is. I mean, look at this. That damage is not caused by anything other than barrel bombs. Pretty stunning, isn't it? I just don't think we have any idea. Well, it goes on for quite a while. It's shocking. So here is President Assad this week. And I'm going to turn the sound down on this so you don't need to turn it up. In the lower left-hand corner, he went out for a drive through this area, which is what you do, right? When you've destroyed an area, is you go get in your car and drive through it when you're the head dictator. And then here he is meeting with his troops in Ghouta just the other day. And they're all shouting and chanting, welcome, their support for Assad in the midst of these ruins. It's just pretty. I mean, look out the window of his car as he's driving by. There's just, this is the area that he's driving through, is eastern part of Damascus. It's just wrecked. And by the way, these are videos that he put up on his own Twitter account. About 8 of them. You can go look them up. I don't know if it says Madman Assad or whatever his Twitter handle is, but this is counting the dead in Mosul. They've been going in to try to figure out how many dead people are. This is where ISIS was running things and killing people, and now they're finding that between ISIS and the attacks to take back Mosul, there are far more deaths than what they've said. Foreign Policy has a good article. ISIS 2.0 is really just the original ISIS. There's some other things that are going on that I think this is where I'm concerned. I think a radio program you should listen to is Secure Freedom Radio with Frank Gaffney, Center for Security Policy. Secure Freedom Radio. You should find it. And it's an hour show every day. He interviews people like Katie Hopkins, Diana West, Mark Schneider, who wrote this article, Peter Pry, Phil Haney, all these people that give very good information about what's going on. And this is a concern that Mark Schneider's been writing about, is that Russian tactical nukes are real. And what's happened is that Russia has put into place these tactical nuclear weapons. They're low yield. We even acknowledged it in our Russian military power thing, and they compared Russia's non-strategic nuclear challenge. Look at the different weapons that Russia has that can use low-yield nuclear explosive devices, and then look at what we have. And so this is why when I hear people chanting for war, I'm concerned, because when Putin's out there saying all this stuff that he has, I'm believing him. And I don't know how we respond. The they give a scenario here. Imagine this scenario, much like it did in Ukraine, Russia. Russia invades Estonia. The U.S. comes to the defense of its NATO ally, but as American troops flow forward, Russia uses a tactical nuclear weapon on a U.S. carrier group in the Baltic Sea, killing a few thousand. If you were president, how would you respond? I mean, what do? We have an ICBM, so we launch an ICBM, but what's Russia going to do in response? They're going to launch an ICBM. And so it puts us in a very bad spot because we don't really have anything to respond to. Then you go in, then China comes out this week and says, hey, we're going to support you guys. And one of the ways that they're going to support, and they're way ahead of us, I think, is in the area of cyber attacks and cyber forces. They're really far advanced. You layer on top of that space weapons. And they had at the University of Pennsylvania, the Center for Ethics and the Rule of Law had a seminar the other day, the weaponization of outer space, ethical and legal boundaries. And so all of these things that for decades, Bible prophecies, students and teachers and speakers have put all of this into their talks. And people would laugh, oh, weapons in outer space, yeah, we're going to do that. Or cyber warfare, or the mark of the beast, how's that? And people were skeptical that this was going to happen, and now here we are. So this is, I think, interesting. I'm going to talk about MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, and it's interesting what happened. So here is the New York Times article this week about Mohammed bin Salman. He's on a make nice tour, meeting everybody in America, and I think today he was meeting with Macron in France. The Atlantic has an article. Now, this is an article in the Atlantic recently called their current issue, How Evangelicals Lost Their Way and Got Hooked by Donald Trump. But Jeffrey Goldberg did and you can read that article what you want, and to make your own decisions. But Jeffrey Goldberg did an interview with MBS. 60 Minutes did an interview with him. And I'm concerned because everybody's fawning over this guy. Oh, he's so wonderful. He's so charismatic. And I'm like, even Hugh Hewitt was interviewing Jeffrey Goldberg. Says, oh man, I read this interview is fantastic. It's unbelievable. So I went, and I'm going to read you part of the interview. I'm going to take 10 minutes or so. Saudi Crown Prince, Iran's supreme leader, makes Hitler look good. Now look, a lot of us would agree with that. And he said this, I believe that each people anywhere has a right to live in their peaceful nation. I believe the Palestinians and the Israelis have a right to have their own land. This is unprecedented for an Arab leader to come out and say this, that Israel has a right to exist. This is really a game changer. But listen to what some of the other things that he said in this interview, and I hope you hear them, and I hope you share my concern with where this is going. And look, if he's making peace with, if he wants to be nice to Israel, I'm okay with that. But I'm just saying be very, very cautious. When you shake hands, count your fingers. Listen to this. Islam is a religion of peace. This is the translation of Islam. God and His Islam give us two responsibilities. The first is to believe, to do good things and not bad things. If we do bad things, God will judge us on Judgment Day. Our second duty as Muslims is to spread the word of God. For 1,400 years, Muslims have been trying to spread the word of God. In the Middle East and North Africa and Europe, they weren't allowed to spread the word. That's why they fought to spread the word. But as you also see that in a lot of countries in Asia, Indonesia, Malaysia, India, Muslims were free to spread the word. And how many tens of millions died in India? 100 million, maybe 200 million were killed as the word was spread. They were told, go ahead, say whatever you want to say. The people have free will to believe. Well, this is direct quotes. This is right from the transcript, the translation, what he said. have free will to believe whatever they want to believe in. Islam in this context was not about conquering. It was about peacefully spreading the word. And I'm telling you, everybody is just like, oh, it's so wonderful. I can never go to Saudi Arabia now. Probably can't go to Turkey or Iran either. I'll get there someday. But God didn't ask us to do this, and the Prophet Muhammad did not ask us to do this. God only asked us to spread the word. And this mission is accomplished. Today, every human has the right to choose their belief. In every country, it is possible to buy religious books. The message is being delivered. We have no duty anymore to fight to spread Islam. But in the triangle of evil, they want to manipulate Muslims to tell them their duty as Muslims, their dignity as Muslims requires the establishment of a Muslim empire. First, in the triangle, we have the Iranian, he's talking about a triangle of evil, the Iranian regime that wants to spread their extremist ideology, their extremist Shiite ideology. They believe that if they spread it, the hidden imam will come back and he will rule the whole world from Iran and spread Islam even to America. Listen, Sunnis believe the same thing. So, the second part of the triangle is the Muslim Brotherhood, which is another extremist organization. They want to use the democratic system to rule countries and build shadow caliphates everywhere. Then they would transform into a real Muslim empire. And listen, he came right out and mentioned Iran. You heard the speech that I read to you earlier, Erdogan, where Erdogan was talking. In fact, here's what Erdogan said. I didn't have time to get this into a slide. He said this, I think this is a speech in March, just a month ago. Those who thought we've forgotten about all these lands after withdrawing in tears a century ago better realize now they are wrong about Turkey. We say at every opportunity we have that Syria, Iraq, and other places on the map are no different from our own homeland. We are struggling so that a foreign flag will not be waved anywhere where Adhan, the Islamic call to prayer, is recited. The Turks have sacrificed in the last 2 centuries. 5 million square kilometers of territory under Ottoman rule was plundered through deceit, plots, and reduced to 870,000 square kilometers. The sleeping giant has now awakened. We are marching toward Mecca with God's permission. So, listen, when you hear that the second leg of the triangle is the Muslim Brotherhood, the translation, I believe, of what MBS was talking about was the Muslim Brotherhood as associated with Erdogan of Turkey. He did not name him, just like when Erdogan was speaking a few months ago when he said, well, you know, there's these other Arabs who want, well, he just said this past week, these Arabs who want to make peace with Israel. Who's he talking about? MBS. They just haven't gotten to where they're calling each other out directly. They're kind of doing it, you know, they're trying to sneak one by us. But it's pretty clear where they're going with all of this. The third part is the terrorists, Al-Qaeda, that want everything to do with force. Al-Qaeda leaders, ISIS, they were all Muslim Brotherhood first. Osama bin Laden, al-Zawahiri, the leader of ISIS. This is very clear. This triangle is promoting an idea that God and Islam are not asking us to promote. Their idea is totally against the principles of the United Nations and the idea of different nations having laws that represent their needs. So listen. All he had to say was, oh, the principles of the United Nations. And everybody went, oh good. I mean, I thought you were maybe about, you know, you threw all your relatives in jail, but, you know, we can understand. But you really want to uphold the principles of the United Nations, you're fine. What is this? This is Delusion 2.0. Okay? I don't know if by the way, I don't know if the Lord will return before we have Delusion 3.0. Okay? Don't know. Listen to this. MBS. He asked him about Wahhabism. Jeffrey Goldberg did. First of all, this Wahhabism, please define it for us. We're not familiar with it. This is MBS saying Wahhabism, extreme, funded by the Saudis, right? That led to 9/11 and everything. What do you mean you don't know about it? MBS, what is Wahhabism? You're the crown prince of Saudi Arabia. You know what a Wahhabism is. MBS, no one can define this Wahhabism. It's a movement founded by Ibn al-Wahhab in the 1700s, very fundamentalist in nature, an austere Salafist-style interpretation. MBS. No one can define Wahhabism. There is no Wahhabism. You know, it's sort of like this and this, you know. We don't believe we have Wahhabism. We believe we have in Saudi Arabia Sunni and Shiite. And then he said something about Hitler is the worst thing you can be. I believe that the Iranian supreme leader makes Hitler look good. Really? Hitler didn't do what the supreme leader is trying to do. Hitler tried to conquer Europe. This is bad. Goldberg, yes, very bad. Goldberg. Oh, here, I had an extra slide in there. You're even equated the supreme leader to Hitler. He's really bad. Very bad, he says. But the supreme leader is trying to conquer the world. He believes he owns the world. They're both evil guys. He is the Hitler of the Middle East. In the 1920s and 30s, no one saw Hitler as a danger, only a few people, until it happened. We don't want to see that happen in the Middle East. We want to stop this through political moves, economic moves, intelligent moves. We want to avoid war. I'm curious about Donald Trump and Barack Obama. It seems you think Trump has a better understanding of this issue than Barack Obama. And this guy's a good politician, man. He may have been born into this, but he's been paying attention. Both of them understand it. I believe he had different tactics. He believed that if he gave Iran opportunities to open up, it would change. But with a regime based on this ideology, it will not open up soon. 60% of the Iranian economy is controlled by the Revolutionary Guard. And then he says this, do you believe the Jewish people have a right to a nation state in at least part of the ancestral homeland? I believe that each people anywhere has a right to live there in their peaceful nation. I believe that Palestinians and Israelis have the right to have their own land. But we have to have a peace agreement to assure the stability for everyone to have normal relations. You have no religious-based objection to the existence of Israel? We have religious concerns about the fate of the Holy Mosque in Jerusalem and about the rights of the Palestinian people. This is what we have, but we don't have any objection against any other people. How many churches are there in Saudi Arabia? I mean, open. Yeah. Israel's a big economy compared to their size, and it's a growing economy. And of course, there are a lot of interests we share with Israel. And if there is peace, there would be a lot of interest between Israel and the Gulf Cooperation Council countries and countries like Egypt and Jordan. And this is also in the article. According to the former U.S. peace negotiator Dennis Ross, moderate Arab leaders have spoken of the reality of Israel's existence, but acknowledgement of any sort of right to Jewish ancestral land has been a red line no leader has crossed until now. And it appears that they're, I guess, getting tired of this. So he went on a tour. I think he saw Oprah. He met with Trump. He met with Mattis. He met with Christine Lagarde, who, I don't know if she still is head of the World Bank. He met with a bunch of Jewish groups and Jewish leaders in the United States, and said, I'm going to invest money with you guys. And then the guy at Qatar came out and said, well, he calls him, the guy at Qatar called him out. Guy has a lot of money. One of his associates bought this Da Vinci painting recently for $450,300,000. But look at the juxtaposition of the front page of the New York Times. On the right, you see the Saudi Prince's Tour, Gates, Oprah. On the left, though, what do you see? Alarms raised on nominees' views on Islam. What's that about? Well, the new nominee for Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, is going to face a big fight. Why? Because he's come out and he says he thinks Islam is not so good. It's evil. He's called it out. He's said what a lot of us believe. So Pompeo, they're fighting, like, we can't let this guy in our government. And then here comes the guy who's the head of the holy places, and it's, hey, this is great. Look at this guy. Isn't he wonderful? On a yacht and a house, he spent $1 billion. One house, one yacht. So he's got some pretty serious coin. But I'm very concerned where this is going. I think Prime Minister Netanyahu is welcoming it, but is very skeptical. So here's this Gaza thing. Let's do this, and then we'll... they put, like, supposedly 10,000 tires. Several of them might have been the flats I've been having because of all this road construction around Columbus. Look at the headlines. Everywhere you looked, it was headlines. Israeli troops kill 9 Palestinians, 10 Palestinians. The number kept going up. Here's some, like, lower part is just some of what's going on when they're burning this. This is on the Gaza side. And by the way, did you see this in the upper video? Look at the flag up top. Do you see the 2 Palestinian flags and what's in between? Now, people are saying that's photoshopped because nobody believes it's Delusion 2.0. No, people don't even believe what they see. I mean, I saw a big discussion on Facebook about, oh, that's a fake photo. It's fake. But this is what they were doing. They were trying to cause a border incursion. This is very bad pollution, by the way. I mean, I know there's been a big fear. There's like a place up around Upper Sandusky that has like millions of tires up there. Do you know about this? And if it ever gets struck by lightning the wrong way, it'll be very bad. I mean, this is 10,000. We're talking millions of tires up there. Probably shouldn't scare you like that, but there's big piles of them. I think they've covered them over. But I mean, so this is what's going on. Look at the end. Well, they were just throwing rocks. I mean, David took down a 9-foot guy with a rock like that, throwing us. And they're very good with these slingshots, and they can go very quickly. Other news, Prime Minister came out this morning, Gaza protesters' true intent is to destroy Israel. That's what they want to do. By the way, also, story in the Jerusalem Post on the second page this morning, indictment for the Prime Minister's wife could be imminent, but they've been saying that for months. They tried to get something at the Security Council. The U.S. blocked it. Exercised their veto. The Palestinian Authority then came out and said, well, we got to change the Security Council because it's not fair for the United States to stop what everybody else in the world wants to have happen. And look, what they wanted to do is they wanted to breach the fence. They wanted to send thousands of people over there. They wanted to provoke Israel. And the other thing that they were trying to do, I think, is they were trying to provoke a response of people in the West Bank. They wanted to get them to rise up and go against Israel. But the problem is they've gone on, they've had this separation for so long now that they don't have any relationship with each other. The people in the Gaza Strip and the people in Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, they're completely separate entities. And so Hamas is trying to consolidate, but there are a lot of Hamas supporters and we met some of them in the in Judea and Samaria. Let's see. There's a terrorist attack thwarted just outside of Jerusalem, the Jerusalem Industrial Park. And then Trump is saying, he sort of said we're leaving Syria. He sort of said we're not leaving Syria. We don't have a timetable. And that led to what reports are a pretty tense phone call between Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump this week. Hamas leader vows to breach the borders and pray at Al-Aqsa. So it's heating up, but the thing that's concerned me the most is that people are really involved in this delusion. Dexter Van Zyl at the Keim Report has a good article this morning about churches that enabled the Soviets now cheer Hamas. You can read that. It was just put up the other day by Brian. And then this one thing, and I'll close with this. This is a promo video from a couple years ago for Christ at the Checkpoint in Bethlehem, and that's coming up the end of May in Bethlehem. But then the report came out that they're going to have a Christ at the Checkpoint conference in the United States in October in Oklahoma City. So, which is where a lot of Bible prophecy ministries are headquartered. In fact, I think Prophecy Watchers is having their conference. It ends on the 14th and Christ at the Checkpoint starts. And I am going to talk about this, but because I think this is important, but I'm going to do it when I have a little bit more time, about Jewish families moving back into Hebron, into a couple homes right near the cave of Machpelah. I think it's a very important thing to talk about. Let's see, do I have anything else? Okay, no, I'll talk about that next week for sure. So, can you see how the world is deluded? This crown prince comes over, and all of a sudden we're supposed to forget about 1,400 years of history. And everybody's running around saying, oh, this is wonderful, this is so great. And he's got a lot of money. I saw a big article on the Arab News this morning out of Saudi Arabia talking about, oh, look at what he's going to do with this Saudi Arabia 2030, which coincides with the Agenda 2030 of the United Nations. He's going to build this big, fantastic city. This is going to be wonderful. It's going to be fantastic. Everybody's going to want to come to Saudi Arabia. And I just think this is delusional thinking. I think it's going to continue. I think we're going to continue to have problems with speaking the truth. But good thing is, God has our back, right? We don't have to worry about that. So just speak the truth and let God sort it out. So let's pray. Father, pray that you'll be with us this week, Lord. I pray that you'll give us opportunities to share the truth of your gospel, that we would be people who are not discouraged by what we see, but we're encouraged that these things are what you said would happen before your return, and that we should look forward to your return. We should look forward to ultimately you returning and setting up your kingdom. Bless us this week. Watch over us. Give us strength. Infuse us with your Holy Spirit so that we can be bold and know what to say at all times. In Jesus' name, amen.